Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is April 29th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So this week we have two special guests, Matt and Jeff, joining us. For the past few weeks, or actually month, I think, they have been working on a broader team within Microsoft to create the enterprise scale construction set for SAP on Azure. Before they tell us what this is in detail, we will, as always, quickly take a look at the news from this week. So let me actually share my screen. I want to start with something that I heard from a colleague, and that's the Azure DevOps Demo Generator. So you can access it via this URL. You can sign in with your user. This is all free, so there's a trial and whatever. Then you can create your project, and there are a bunch of templates available. It's really very broad, a broad range of things that you can do there. But one interesting thing is there's also a template for SAP. And if you do that, then you end up here in your Azure DevOps application. And then if you go to the boards, then you can actually here have a beautiful list of steps that can help you start with your SAP on Azure project. So for example, there's foundation, networking, architecture, compute, and stuff like that. And then there are certain subtasks, which I think we will hear about in a second in a similar way. So I thought this was some interesting content that we have there. The next thing that is obviously really interesting is the announcement, and I think we talked about this already in the last week, but now we have this official announcement that we have released new M-Series for this medium memory workload for SAP HANA. Last time we just talked about the announcement. Now they are really released for HANA, SAP HANA workload. So if you go actually to the certified and supported SAP HANA hardware directory, so there you can see these new virtual machines showing up here. And what is also really nice now is we have over 100 of these certified solutions. And why is this important? Well, obviously in the cloud and working with SAP HANA workload, you need to have certified machines, which means you cannot choose any virtual machine, but you need to jump from virtual machine to virtual machine if you need more CPU or if you need more memory and stuff like that. And obviously with our huge list of certified virtual machines now, we're really very flexible in that you can select exactly the virtual machine size and CPU requirements that you have for your specific project. So I thought that is really, it's really impressive to see how much effort the teams are putting in there to certify the virtual machines.
I would say it's very interesting because HANA is typically huge VMs. That's automatically. So the first one is M32. 32 CPUs. We are really lowering down, so to say. So I mean, it's also basically interesting for the testing and prototyping smaller systems as well, meaning cheaper.
And
so
there's one very, very important gap. What we now finally fill in, it's now we have machine certificate for HANA between half and 1 tera.
Mm-hmm.
We fill that gap. So it's also now there with this M-Series.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really great to see all the investments that is going in there. Last week, I already talked about this hackathon that is currently happening between SAP and Microsoft, or that will start. So as mentioned, we had Etienne and Leon talk about this joint hackathon between SAP and Microsoft, where they had invited partners to create solutions. Now, one of these partners, and there are a few others, obviously, Entity Data, had at that time developed or participated in this hackathon, and they had created here this digital concierge service. There were a few others, other partners that created a few scenarios around COVID-19 and stuff like that. So it's nice to see. So Murali, who's also one of the key drivers, in this case, obviously from SAP, behind this hackathon, it's really great to see the breadth and powerful scenarios that were created at that time. And again, so if you are a partner, if you are interested in joining this second iteration of the hackathon, you can still sign up here on the events.sap.com page to participate in this hackathon. There are a few days left to submit your participation, but I think this can also be a really nice hackathon again. Then obviously you might have heard about the earnings, the Q3 earnings from Microsoft. There's a lot of content. Obviously, there's the earnings call with a lot of details. One thing struck out to me, and that was really interesting. So Satya explicitly talked about the Power Platform, talked about the amazing growth that we see in the Power Platform. And there was one interesting quote that I want to highlight here, and that's really that just like Office revolutionized the productivity gains for knowledge workers, the Power Platform will do the same for domain experts. So it's really this whole low-code, no-code approach. We are really now at a stage where so many customers are already using it. So many employees really or business users are using the Power Platform to build new applications. I think that is really something that is interesting to see, this huge adoption. And obviously, Power Platform also works with SAP, so we can also connect using the Power Platform to SAP systems. So I think that's definitely something that is a very interesting area right now. And just today, actually, there was a very interesting blog post by Gregor Wolf. Gregor Wolf is one of the SAP mentors, so similar like on the Microsoft side, the MVPs, and he's apparently working currently at in a customer project, and the request was there to have a certain approval step. So what Gregor did is he created a Power Automate flow that allows you to post an approval step in Teams. And once the user approves this step in his Teams application, then the underlying workflow in this CAP, in the Cloud Application Programming Model, is approved, and the flow continues then. So he has outlined all the steps here. He has also a video that talks about, or where he actually demos the scenario. So I think that this is also a really nice scenario where you can see how Power Automate can obviously work very well together with Teams, but then from there you can also really interact with your SAP system. With this, just two more announcements, two quick other announcements. So Microsoft Build starts May 25th, and now you can register. So I think last year this was already a pretty cool event, the first virtual event at that time, I think. So now obviously it's again virtual, it's free, so you can just sign up, and then like last year, enjoy some really cool sessions, hopefully. And that's on the build side. On the SAP side, we now also have SAPPHIRE Now, so you can also register now for SAPPHIRE Now, starting with this global keynote, as we talked about last time on June 2nd, and then there are some regional events as well. But now at least you can register and block your dates for June 2nd for this global keynote. So with this, a very quick recap on for this week. Now what I would like to do is hand over to Jeff and Matt. And maybe both of you can quickly introduce yourself. What are you doing? And then I'm looking forward to your session and talk us about what you have done with the Cloud Adoption Framework and how this relates to SAP. So over to you, Jeff.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having us. Great to be here. I am a cloud solution architect in the solution architecture teams. I work on the apps and infrastructure strategy for enabling customers to adopt a cloud. And so if you think about the cloud adoption framework, well-architected framework tends to be my focus area. And I help support our the Microsoft community in getting started with Azure. Matt?
And I am Matt Henry. I am an area owner within Corp. I work within the CSU. I think there's quite a bit of CSU representation here, but it's all about customer success, right? And I work on technical strategy for SAP and AVS. And for those who don't know, AVS is the Azure VMware solution. The reason I point that out is just because I think that we're going to see some growing applicability there for SAP customers in the future. Some people run SAP on VMware on-prem. They may want to do it in the cloud, and we want to give them that option. So just wanted to throw that out there, but really great to be here, Holger. And I've had so many months of so much fun working on this construction set and learning about CAF and WAF and enterprise scale, and really about all the people that have been involved. I'm very people driven, and there are a lot of great characters in this community. So great to be here.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think actually some time back, we had a colleague already talking about the cloud adoption framework in general. At that time, obviously, we were just introducing the generic requirements or the generic ideas behind this, so completely independent from SAP. And yeah, now obviously this has changed. So I don't know, maybe can you show us where we can find it and what it's all about? And yeah,
absolutely, love to dive in here. So I'm just gonna set a bit of context, and then Matt, feel free to jump in as we kind of talk through what is the end-to-end scenario, right? So within the cloud adoption framework, there is a specific section that is called adoption scenarios. And so what we're doing in that section is we're helping customers who are looking at SAP to really understand what that adoption process looks like, right? So as we see here in this new guide that we have here, we're bringing together solving three fundamental challenges for our customers, right? Number one, reducing architectural complexity so that they understand what are their core decisions they need to have when they're adopting SAP. Number two, we want to be able to provide an example of what good looks like, an example of what, like, for example, the automation looks like for SAP and the approach for automation. And then the third challenge for customers that we want to solve is around providing them with the compliance, security, and best practices that we see for SAP on Azure from a platform perspective, right? And so this end-to-end scenario, I'm sharing my screen now. You can see on the left, there's tip of the hats, you'll say, to the cloud adoption frameworks that you had someone on the show a couple of sessions ago that talked about the cloud adoption framework. They probably mentioned our core methodologies, right? So strategy, plan, ready, manage, govern, right? And so when we look at the SAP adoption scenario, we're taking the cloud adoption framework and everything that it covers across any workload and saying what's really important specific to SAP, and let's provide you with a guide for that.
So the cool, just to put this into perspective. So now I'm new to, or well, actually I think maybe I am already using Azure, but now I have finally decided to also move my SAP estate to Azure. So basically what this guide gives me now is an instruction how to get started. What do I need to consider? What is specific to SAP? Probably, for example, these certified virtual machines. What about networking architectures and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's organization wide, right? So this is not just about those key technical design areas, but it's also about the business operating. So like if you are starting with the SAP workload, you need to understand your strategy, right? So here we've landed here in the overview section, but if we go into the strategy section, here are the reasons, right? The reasons to move an SAP platform to the cloud. So we're really helping you with that business justification as well. Many customers already have a cloud strategy in place, a cloud adoption strategy in place, or at least they have a cloud adoption plan where they'd like to go. And so we want to pull that level of planning, understanding your complete landscape, and say, okay, if you're going to adopt SAP on Azure, here are the important strategy components to building your adoption plan, right? Understanding how to measure progress, how to build your business justification, right? So like, as an architect, we have a lot of conversations around availability sets, availability zones, the cost between different services, right? But the business has to make a decision when you get started on what the importance of availability, uptime, those kind of things are, so it can inform your architecture.
That's actually pretty cool, because I think in a lot of companies, there's the CIO decision, probably, we need to go in the cloud. Everyone talks about we need to go in the cloud. So let's also take the SAP system in cloud. Why? Well, I don't know yet. And then here we get exactly a lot of ideas or reasonings why it actually makes sense. What are the benefits of running your SAP system not on premise, but really running the SAP system in Azure? And that's what you're outlining here in this document.
Project management in the IT space and has taught us over a period of time that executive understanding of what we're going to achieve for business impact is the key driver in success of a program or adoption, right? And so starting with strategy and making sure that the business understands that the impact of what this SAP on cloud is deployment is going to drive for them helps us ensure that we have alignment to deliver innovation to the customer, right? And so we start with strategy, and then we kind of work our way through the building a plan for making sure that you have the understanding your digital estate if you currently have an SAP environment and are migrating, or if it's net new, making sure that you have the assets that you would need around dependencies, right? And so this is building the plan not just for how you're going to approach having now your business strategy in place, training your team, but also how you're going to approach the SAP is a swath of different applications. So I'm gonna stop right here because I know Matt has got some points to add to here on planning, right, and pulling together that complete vision.
I definitely do. There's so much to unpack here, and I think that if I could sum it up really well, well, I'd love to if I could sum it up really well, but I'll do my best. It's if you think about the potentially weeks, maybe even months, where a customer has a need or a customer has an idea and they want to go through planning and they think about making decisions and they think about architecture and they think about deployment and they think about sustaining those deployments. This is a reference that gives customers a couple weeks back, if I would say it that way. Basically, I've been a solution architect a very long part of my career, and when you're working with customers, you can lose a lot of time in early discussions to, well, Bob's not in the meeting and Bob's the networking guy and he's got to make this decision, and you lose a lot of time, and it's critical time. It's time that the customer could essentially be saving time and money by following guidance like this. So with respect to planning, with respect to decision making, with respect to execution, this is meant to put a couple weeks back in the customer's pocket. And we took a couple of months up front to give the customer some time back. And I mean, at the very highest level, that's the point I want to get across about this construction set, which is built upon the enterprise scale landing zone, which is based on the principles of CAF.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think like that's once we've got the business and the plan aligned, then we actually get into being ready, like building out inside of Azure the core components. This is our platform landing zone for Azure. Well, we have a SAP Azure landing zone, right? And how to evaluate that and the approaches for that. And that's really where the enterprise scale guidance for the SAP workload comes into play. So we have a section here underneath enterprise scale that underneath the SAP adoption scenario called enterprise scale construction set, and the enterprise scale guidance here is meant to help our customers adopt Azure with our opinionated best practices. So if for those who are not aware, just to do a brief recap, the enterprise scale landing zone is our opinionated approach, right, to adoption for Azure. So we have this architecture and reference implementation. This is kind of little, I'll try to make it a little bit bigger here. This is our reference architecture for the design of a Azure tenant. And then what we've done is we've said, you know, it's good that we have the architecture, but we also need to provide a customer with a reference implementation. So we have a GitHub repo that has a deployment of enterprise scale in it that a customer can use to quickly get started. To Matt's point, we want to shave off that time beforehand and provide as much guided experience as we can to help with those architectural decisions, right? So this architecture is the base of the platform. When we look at our the SAP scenario and go into the overview here, we'll see that we have that commonality of building on top of the architecture of enterprise scale. So you'll see we have the connectivity subscription identified here in our management group structure, and then we have specifically subscriptions that are aligned here for the SAP workload. And so we're building upon best practice Azure Landing Zone design areas that we have in the Cloud Adoption Framework and saying, okay, now here are the components. And this is where, as you were starting to speak to earlier about the networking and the identity, this is where we're providing that prescriptive recommendation and guidance.
But what is nice that you have a dedicated section to SAP of the Cloud Adoption Framework, I believe was not available before, so they don't have to jump it around, you know. But it's more you're targeting, I'm doing the SAP, then what does it mean, all the circles around it, how to move it.
And I think that it's about going from general to specific. There are some customers that they may implement everything that they need and should have from the enterprise scale landing zone. For some customers, that's it. Maybe they don't have SAP, maybe they don't have WVD, maybe they don't have AKS. But for the customers that do, and we care the most about SAP, obviously here, right, it puts that block right on top of all of that guidance. And it says we're taking you into the specialization, the characteristics that are really important to SAP.
And it makes navigation much more easier for that specific use case. Yeah, right.
It's a big story, right? The relationship between platform ops and application ops and app ops team is an important relationship of that encompasses security and governance and compliance, right? And so when we approached building out the guidance here that's in the network topology and connectivity section, well, all of these sections, but I'm gonna share the network topology and connectivity section here, we got to inherit, right, from the Azure Platform Landing Zone, Enterprise Scale Landing Zone, the connectivity, right, that goes to our hub. So in this section, whereas typically we talk about planning for IP addresses at the enterprise scale level for our hub, our subscription VNets, right? In this context, we're talking about planning for IP addressing for those subscriptions that are going to be in the SAP workload, and then providing topology configurations, thinking about DNS, right, and the overall network topology. So this allows us to go from the general to the specific, as Matt said, and get really close to these considerations and recommendations on, you know, making sure that a customer is set up for success, and providing options for flexibility for their growth.
Well, that's really great, because I think again, if I put myself in a customer's shoes and I have my on-premise environment, everything is working fine, and now all of a sudden I need to migrate this to Azure, and yes, I already have some fantastic generic recommendations, like this is how what you showed in this generic reference architecture, this is how it should look like. But then I have specific SAP requirements, and obviously there is some good documentation available. There's a documentation how to set up an SAP system on Azure and stuff like that. But with this document, I really have a guide that guides me through all the required steps. I love the thing where you really started with strategy, with planning, and now we get here some recommendations of how the network topology would look like for an SAP system. Where obviously, for example, I saw down there here Azure NetApp files. This is something that is used very often with SAP, for example, in the specific area. So you're taking a closer look at this specific. How does this fit into this requirement? We need DNS. So how does this relate to SAP? So I think it's this to Matt's point. I think this will really help me a lot of time that I would otherwise need to look up in different places, collect, interview, maybe do some tests and fail and do. Here I have a blueprint that allows me to, skip these weeks of planning, of trial and error, and I have really a nice guide that gets me started.
I think this network topology connectivity, very good example. Jeff, if you can go to Cloud Adoption Framework Enterprise Scale Network Topology Connectivity section, just not go there, and just expand it. Yeah, and this is exactly what Jeff and Matt mentioned. This is just extension of already defined section in enterprise scale, and you see it's very complex because networking section is very complex, and now you should somehow filter all those stuff and understand what is our best practices regarding network in general. And now you're going it back to SAP construction set and apply that what you learned, but now specific or filter by SAP needs. Yeah? And this is a very good example how enterprise scale is in combination with all these future construction sets. Yeah? And this is the idea. Yeah?
Yeah, and we build on the back of that, right? And I think that's networking is a key area, security, governance, and compliance, right? So we talk about this shared responsibility in this section, and there is that we see in customers, depending upon your cloud operating model, right? So you could have a cloud center of excellence with decentralized IT, or as a customer, you could have a cloud operating team that have responsibilities of everything kind of across the platform and the application. And so when we define the security and governance and compliance for the platform ops section, when we start looking at SAP, we can say, okay, we know that things like log analytics are put in place. We know that our Azure activity logs are going to be flowing into that centralized log analytics in our management subscription. So we can give very prescriptive guidance built on the back of that landing zone.
But that's also when you clicked on security, I first thought, okay, now we would talk about just the here you can use network security groups, or you can put in a Azure firewall to protect, or whatever. I mean, last week, for example, we had Evren on the show, and he was really going into very much details of how to have a zero trust environment with SAP. But here, what I immediately like is that you start on a completely different level. You really talk about responsibility models. You also talk about the people that are involved in this. That you have different teams that most likely on premise you have different responsibilities. Folks that worked on premise have different responsibilities, and now in the cloud there is, as you said, there might be a cloud operations team. There might be other teams that look after this. So you're not only looking at the technology, but also at the responsibilities from a customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think enterprise scale landing zone, we wanted to start with compliance at the launch, right? And so we use a management group structure, and then we use Azure policy to help us with the configuration of the Azure tenant and these subscriptions for SAP. So any resource that's deployed into the subscription for SAP workloads is going to be in compliance from the start, right? And so then it becomes, how do we build the compliance that we have, build that compliance to give us visibility on security, give us visibility on things like configuration management and drift and configuration management. We can audit those things. We can have that visibility and that have that visibility and have that audit at start. So that team is enabled, and that gets us. That's the shortcuts that I think help us accelerate, right, and help us get to our end goal. We've got the executive buy-in. Now we've got the us as the cloud engineers. We need to execute this thing, and the guidance, the architecture helps you with the design. And we know that that's the whole core of what we want to drive with our customers, is reducing that architectural complexity to make those decisions that you're talking about, right? Building on enterprise scale, but also the reference implementation. So the SAP has automation framework. It has a SAP automation framework, SAPonAzure automation framework. And that is a reference implementation that when we get to the platform automation and DevOps section, is included as a key tool to help a customer get started with building out their landscape for SAP using this automation. So now we not only have a design architecture and considerations we should make and making our decisions, boom, we've got our architectural decision done. We also have something we can go and deploy into that SAP subscription in the Azure Landing Zone, and then actually get hands-on with it, right? Get hands-on with this SID SAP deployment. Matt, I think this is a great place where we can kind of drive into that, right?
Yeah, this is another area where there's a lot of complexity that might not seem to be there on the surface. And one of the ways I try to break complexity is through the use of analogies. Some people love this, some people hate this. But the bottom line is, when I think about enterprise scale landing zone and specifically the SAP construction set, I think about in programmers' terms, it's like we provide architecture and an implementation. The architecture is the class. It describes what this thing looks like, where are the guardrails, what data types can exist, what methods are supported, all that good stuff. But the reference implementation is really taking this to the next level, and it's providing you an instance of the class that nobody has to fill out right out of the gate. Here you go. Here's an instance of the class. I think it's really important to understand, and I think Jeff was alliterating to this. It's not the only way you can do it and still be part of a well-architected example for a customer. It's just, we've done a lot of work to get you there very quickly. And another analogy that I would use, we used this a lot in the very beginning when we were trying to get everything figured out, is I like to characterize the cloud adoption framework as being like you push a button and you've got 50% of the solution right out of the box, right? And we talked about this. For most customers, maybe that's fine. But if you want that additional 25, 30% of the solution, that's where you go to this solution, to this framework. You push the button there, you're using Terraform and soon to be Ansible, and you're getting the instance of the class that is described by the reference architecture. It's not the only way to be a well-architected and do this, but it is an example of how to be scalable. And it's more or less, you click it, you got it, you can start messing with it, you can adjust the scripting to your needs, and you can build quickly. And you know that you are well architected right out of the gate. So that part is huge to me. The analogy I forgot to mention, though, is you're building the harbor, not the boat. I think that's important to keep in mind because you're building a place that is well architected, and customers are going to add their own applications on top of this. They're going to bring in their boats, so to speak. But the construction set is very scenario driven. So in this case, you're saying it is a harbor for cruise liners. You're not going to bring an aircraft carrier into that harbor, if that makes sense.
Without breaking it.
Yeah, Jeff, can you click on this SAP link on SAP Automation Framework, Azure SAP HANA on the top? Yeah, there.
You got it. Yeah, so this is the repo. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is the repo for deployment here, and this is the same as enterprise scale, right? So if I go, I'm just going to jump back over here to enterprise scale, and then if we go to enterprise scale and we talk about implementation, we have the same thing. Like you go to GitHub, and then once you're at GitHub, we have a repo that you can grab and pull down and customize and make your own. Many customers do that, right? They go and they either deploy the reference implementation, which is setting up the management group architecture and the policies into the tenant, and then they'll begin their second journey, which is we have our architectural design, We've deployed the reference implementation, the starting framework of enterprise scale. Now let's build out all the additional components that we need, the multiple subscriptions for our workloads. Let's look at the landscape that we have. But the key thing, the North Star in all of this is SAP. And so this automation, right, it's going to build out. This is where we go, right? And customers customize it. Like I said, ESLZ, tons of customization, customers building out their own policies, making it their own repo, right? And so we want the same thing, the same level of contribution, same level of engagement here.
So it's not just a theory, but it's really a practical thing to run it, right? So which is really nice.
Absolutely.
I mean, theory is also important, right? Because there are many aspects and projects, context, and planning, but actually it's really doing in an easy way according to the best practices which are already defined in the document.
So I was just going to say, and that's, I think, really, really important. So this is not just only documentation, which obviously also brings a lot of benefits already, but this is really something that I, as a customer, can go to. I can take this as a starting point. I can, as you said, modify it. Maybe there are a few things that I don't like, because in my specific scenario, I want to do it a slightly different way. But then I can take this as a template, more or less, deploy it in Azure, and immediately get started. So it's far more than just documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Reference architecture, reference implementation, right? What does the environment look like, and then building it, what is an example of that? That's the cloud operating model part, right? Is that many organizations are used to execution in a data center and they're on-prem. We're very mature in respect across the industry with that. But when we start transitioning to the cloud, making sure that we understand that operating model, infrastructure as code in the cloud, this helps facilitate a customer to start that journey for themselves.
Right. And that's basically extremely speeding up the migration, right? As well. I mean, automation on the end, because if you need to deploy 600 SAP system, and which can be also a distributed system, and with also millions of settings, to click it manually takes a lot of time, and it's very easy to do a mistake, right? So that's for automation on the end is speeding up and raising the quality, right?
Consistency, yeah.
Yeah, consistency, exactly.
So I think, I mean, in the process of creating this, I know a lot of SAP colleagues were involved there. So I think, Microsoft colleagues were involved there. I think there was also a lot of feedback, indirect and direct, from customers that was influencing this project. If you now look, I think this has been published now roughly over a month or something like that, or 2 months ago or something. Have you already received any feedback from customers? Have already some customers used it? I guess, I mean, in the CSA community. So if I'm a Microsoft Cloud Solution Architect and I go to customers, I'm definitely going to use it. But have you already received any feedback from customers on this?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, real quick, let me just jump in on this one. I'm particularly proud of this part. We have some materials that we share internally about who has participated in this. And the name of the game, what Jeff and I do, is all about feedback. At the end of the day, we are trying to build programs based around feedback and help customers, help our architects, our people as well, help their customers succeed. We've worked with over a dozen customers so far, and there are some very big names in that group we're very excited to work with. And I want to extend it even further, and I really want you to listen up if you're listening to this podcast right now. It's not just about customers. We love partners. We want to partner with partners in this effort, and we've already got some pretty big name partners in the game as well. But this is an opportunity for partners to say, look, our offering adheres to these guidelines. We're already well architected out of the gate, and we're going to help you get going even faster because we're taking advantage of these materials and using them. And I think that's what we're seeing from the early partners is they want to get on board with that. They want to use it as part of their offerings. And the customers have given us tremendous feedback. A lot of it has already been incorporated, and it's that flywheel, right? This is going to get better as we get feedback. We're getting feedback from the CSAs through engagements. We're getting feedback from the customers that wanted to pilot. We're getting feedback from what I call the wave 1 customers right now. We're getting ready to go into wave 2 of customers to get more feedback. Jeff, you wanted to add anything to that?
No, I think, for Azure landing zones and what is an enterprise scale landing zone, and what is in SAP in the scenario is that proven has to be the case, right? So this isn't theoretical. We've gotten feedback from customers and partners, as Matt has mentioned. We have to be proven, and we have to align engineering. So a little bit that was shared there is kind of how we make the candy, so to speak, how the Snickers bar is made, is that, across our internal teams, we are providing feedback and working with engineering to make sure that the recommendations and considerations that are included here are in full alignment with scale and the Azure roadmap. So if you even look at, we have a ton of new services we're rolling out. In the beginning of the top of the show, we opened up with a number of announcements, right? The new M-Series VMs. We are tracking those changes and aligning the Azure roadmap in our guidance as well. So just another place I'd like to add as far as being proven and prescriptive.
Yeah, and what I loved was when Matt just said wave 2. So this is not a static document, right? This is not something we're done, so let's leave it and do something else. But you are actively listening for feedback. Actually, as you said, you're calling out even now for partners to work with you on that, to constantly improve it and to enhance the concept. So I think that's really amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're very excited about those partnerships. Partnering with partners, partnering with customers. We'll partner with everybody. And whether you want to tell us we did something wrong or it could be better, that's wonderful. But if you have something new that you want to contribute, there is a real sense of sure, we'll be the gatekeepers because we don't want anybody to get any bad advice or to take advantage of it even. But we want participation from this entire SAP community to make it better, to make it a standard, to make it a go-to. And the idea is that as more customers use this, it becomes more of a standard. So even if a customer does run into issues, God forbid, support or whomever is engaging also has a point of reference that is common to begin looking at the issues.
And everything is backed by GitHub here, so you can contribute to these documents. You can, flag and offer up comments, etc. And as well, same thing for the automation framework, right? We have you can go in here and log issues or add comments as well.
Cool, yeah. No, that was going to be my next question. How if I have some feedback, but you're right. I mean, even the documentation is backed by GitHub, so I can just create a pull request. I can provide my feedback here. Yeah, great.
Yep. Excellent.
Good.
And we'll see that it came from Holger, and we'll be like, no, this is not going through.
Automatic merge.
If Holger delete.
Okay, I'll create an alias and submit my changes from a different name. No, great. I think that this is really, really fantastic. And for me, what I mean, there are a lot of things that I really like, but again, I think in one of our earliest shows, we really started to talk about the cloud adoption framework in a very generic way. And now it's really amazing to see that we are really focusing and drilling down on very specific topics as well. And obviously we know that SAP on Azure is resonating extremely well with customers at the moment. And it's fantastic to see that with documents like this, we give some best practices, we give some guidelines to customers, to partners, to quickly get started. And I loved your comparison, Matt, from the beginning, where you said we give like 6 weeks back to the customers, so they can really jumpstart their project with SAP on Azure. So it's really fantastic.
That's the plan.
Yep.
Good, perfect. So I hope that you will get a lot of additional feedback now after the podcast. I hope a lot of customers, partners are listening and taking a look at this and trying it out. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, if there
maybe something add to partners. Yeah, it's specific for Germany right now, but we just started this month new bootcamp series, SAP on Azure. You know well that Holger, we did that a lot in last years, and we now start a new series. Yeah, so and the first actually day is completely enterprise scale construction set for SAP on Azure. So we dedicate a complete one day for partners here in Germany. And we are done, but we are now preparing for new quarter. So in the new quarter, be ready for new quarter, and we will start again with our online bootcamps, and they are free actually.
Perfect. Yeah, you should give me the link. Then we will also put it in the show notes for registration. Good. With this, I think we're done for today. Matt, Jeff, thank you so much for joining. I think that was a very good session, a lot of very important insights. I hope that maybe with wave 2, as you said, Matt, with new enhancements, maybe we can invite you back with additional insights and additional features. So thank you very much. I hope, yeah, that you enjoyed it, and I'll definitely see you again on the show at some point in time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.